Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm Stephanie Crawford, Executive Director for IDEA. We are going to have a Wednesday webinar with John Spike today. I love John. Not only is he very funny, witty, sarcastic. I'm just singing your praises here. But he is such a proponent for game-based and playful learning, and I can get behind that all day, every day. So I'm just going to give you a few reminders, and then we're going to throw it over to John and let him get started. So I will, at the end of the session, put in the link. If you're an Illinois educator and would like to claim your PDH, you'll be able to do that. And then also at the end, if we have time for question and answer, we found that you're more likely to ask some questions if we stop the recording. So when that time comes, we'll stop the recording and we'll give you that free space to ask any questions that you have. But if you have questions while John is presenting and you want to ask them in the chat, please feel free to do that. He'll be monitoring that and I'll help him keep an eye on it as well. Without further ado, that means I'm going to throw it over to John.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I am honored to be here. I am a proud, I've been to IdeaCon many a time, so I've hopefully I've crossed your paths a few times. If I haven't, I would love to see you at IdeaCon this year. I know we'll be there with the booth and then hopefully doing a session or two as well. I did put up on the screen, hopefully everybody is seeing the slide deck right now. Everybody seeing it okay? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I put up kind of the URL, and I'll throw it in the chat too. Storm Play. Hopefully I typed it right. There we go. And I'll also keep an eye on the chat. I know Stephanie's going to help me keep an eye on the chat as well. So if you have any questions that come up in the moment, if you want to save them for the end, that's totally fine as well. And I'll also just say too, I'm a big fan of if you find something you like in the slide deck and you go off on a tangent with it, you won't offend me. I'm going to share a little bit of everything today. And so you are welcome to, kind of, tackle it and work with anything. If you ask a question about something that was on the screen 10 minutes ago, because you've been playing around with it, that is totally fine with me. So yeah, I'm going to jump in a little bit. And really this session is all about how playful assessment, games, designing games can be involved in your work. If anybody wants to throw their role in the chat, just so I know who's kind of in the chat today as well, that would be awesome. It's always good to know who we've got, whether it's librarians, educators, administrators, curriculum specialists, or reading specialists. I see we got some ELA and social studies in the house. Always a good fit. I'm a ELA teacher by trade, and now I coordinate instructional technology, which we'll get to in just a second. Hey, look at that. Perfect lead into this slide. So yes, who am I? Like I said, my name is John Spike. I work with future teachers, helping them integrate technology in their teaching. I see we do have some library media in the house. I teach a course called Digital Tools for Library Media Specialists. And then I also teach a course called Video Games and Learning for future educators, future game designers. I've also taught Introduction to Education, which is a little bit of everything that we think about in our K-12 and beyond roles. And then I also design educational board and card games for a living. So I have a company called GameStorm.edu. We just released our first game called Game Stormers this year, and we're working on our second game called Doom Scroll, which I'll talk about. I'm also foolishly working on my PhD in collaborative virtual reality in education. So I don't like free time, so I'm doing a little bit of everything right now. So I did mention, I swear this won't be just a sales pitch today. That this is going to be about ideas you can use, but I wanted to share, we're planning on releasing our game Doom Scroll in 2024. And the basic premise of the game is you are a social media company trying to create a social media feed so engaging and also a little bit enraging that it helps people stay on the screens and sell ads. So our goal is to help students understand what social media products are trying to do to them by having them become the social media company. So this is one of my favorite advertisements that you can try to sell. It's a paint by elf symbol set. So we've got a nice little nod to your Bob Rosses out there. This is kind of what the game looks like in action. So the students have a feed and they're adding posts, social media posts in it with visuals and a little bit of emotion to try to sell things like, your Orksercise equipment, because I like really terrible puns. So the game is all about students trying to create a feed that's going to be engaging and just enough of pushing people's emotional buttons to get them primed to buy things. So again, just a little bit of helping students understand what our social media tries to do. So just I'm hoping some of those library media specialists who are tasked with getting our students' digital citizenship ready are a little interested in that. And just meant to be a game that's fun to play with family and friends, but also a game that has a lot of good conversations that could follow. And then Game Stormers is our, kind of our first release. And really, it gets to the heart of what today is about. Today is about how do you use games and playful learning in classes, in libraries, and maker spaces. And so something I do when I do this session live with educators and students is I actually hand out a bunch of Game Stormers cards, and we actually go ahead and try to come up with a 3-card game. And what I've always found is whether educators have zero experience, love games, play them here and there, everybody comes out of there coming up with a game idea from the cards. And so just to give you an overview of how the game's played, basically, you acquire cards and you decide on which cards are going to go in your ultimate game story. So you might make a game about going on an epic quest. Along the way, maybe you meet a mysterious figure who gives you a task or gives you key information. And then along the way, you acquire a crew and a ship, but sadly something malfunctions with your ship that you need to address. And maybe one of your members brews a potion that fixes your ship, right? I'm just kind of making this up with some cards here, but that's the premise of the game, is in inviting your students to be creative, inviting players to be creative and come up with a game idea. And then using this as a jumping off pad for, your own unique creations, writing, having students iterate and design something based on the game they come up with. So in Game Stormers, at the heart of it, it's students creating a 5-card game idea. So just an FYI, if you want to learn more about that, it's at our website, gamestormedu.com/gamestormers. I've got a little shortened URL in the slide deck as well. Okay, enough just pitching of our products, though. Let's get into some good game design topics. I did want to mention, this is just, if you're wondering, some people do ask us, at what ages can you have students playing games and working with games? This is me this summer, and this is students coming up with their own game ideas. These students were 7, 8, and 9 years old playing this game. I played it with as young as 5 and 6-year-old, playing games, coming up with their own game ideas. So this is me sharing with the students. And I also want to just get a plug in. I love talking with students and educators. I'll come in and speak to students virtually for free, just because I like to do that. And when I say virtually for free, I mean virtually, for free, not like it's next to nothing. It is literally nothing. All I suggest is, hey, maybe get some copies of the game that they can try out, right? So yeah, just a lot of people ask, okay, well, what age could I do this at? I've done it with everybody from 7 to 17 plus years old, from high schoolers, middle schoolers, elementary schoolers. So did just want to get a mention in for that. Another thing that students ask me is, where did I get the idea for designing games? And I just want to give a shout out. This is my daughter, Sloan. She's 2.5. And she's actually the main character of the game. And so I tell students when they ask, where do you get inspiration for your game ideas and what inspires you to make games? I tell them it's my daughter. And for that reason, I put her on the cover of the game. I don't know how well you can see my camera, but there is the cover of our game. And there is Sloan, the main character, on there too. So just a shout out to my daughter. She's kind of the inspiration for it. And I'm hoping someday when she's a teenager, she's not super mad and embarrassed that I put her on the cover of the game. Okay, enough about that. One big question I want to answer is the why here, and then we'll get into the kind of practical applications. So one big why for games is that when we talk about female identifying students and male identifying students, one Pew Research study gives a really good snapshot of this. So we know that 97% of male identifying teenagers play games on a semi-regular basis. So they play it at least maybe once a week, some sort of typical digital game, but also that includes board and card games. And then we know 83% of female identifying students typically play it at least once a week as well. So in that, you've got a big interest area in kind of that game space and those game narratives, whether it's board, card, video. students find this an affinity area that gets them excited about a bunch of other activities. So these students aren't just playing games, but they are engaging in the game lore. They're on forums talking about games. Maybe they're into a collectible card game, or maybe they are in a Dungeons and Dragons club, right? So this is just an interest area, and we can tap into what games do really well in our own learning practices. There's also tons of research about the value of games. So I've just looked at research in board games. So just kind of highlighting from a tool I really love. I use a tool for my research called Consensus. It uses AI to help you find really good answers to research questions. And so there's tons of research about board games and game design as a really powerful activity, and having students play games to learn or design games. And so this is just Consensus's kind of summary about, can board and card games help develop skills in students? Basically, it comes out in the research that it can help with mathematical thinking, language development, interpersonal interactions, and also motivating students to learn. So not only are games just incredibly powerful and engaging, but they also can help build real life skills. So I thought that was pretty interesting. If you're in the slide deck, I do have a source to that Consensus research that I'm pulling from too. One big barrier that I hear a lot in talking about this topic is that it might not be an affinity area for the educator or the library media specialist or the administrator. And you might not have the time to really deep dive and get good at game design or finding which games to use. And one thing that I really had the goal of, I started working on kind of the GameStorm EDU resources and ideas back in 2018. I wanted to break down that barrier and make it really accessible so that you didn't have to be the subject matter expert in games, game design, to help your students use what's best about them. So some things that I tried to develop to help with this is, number one, at GameStormEDU.com, we actually have a bunch of activities that are really flexible that you can actually use. So these activities are meant to be activities that you can use. So they're just, this is linked directly to this image, but it's just on our website. We have, under our GameStormers tab, lesson plan. So I'll show where to find this on the site. But I just want to talk about a few of these activities and how they can be used. And so this is actually, they're all one-page lesson plans that you can redesign for your own subject. And so the first one that's really popular, this is what's called designing concept cards. And what I really love about games is that games are really interesting and imperfect systems that you're trying to master. And it's one thing to have students play games that help them understand system thinking. Well, what happens if I change this variable? Or what happens if I try this? What will the impact be? What's really fascinating is when you challenge students and saying, hey, if these concepts that we're learning about were in a system together, how would they impact each other? What would their abilities be? I love asking that question as a ELA teacher, saying, if this character was in a game with this character, how would they impact each other? Which one would be more powerful? What would its abilities be? What would its weaknesses be? How would you depict this character if they were in your favorite game scenario? And why? Talk about why that is. So in the designing concept cards, we actually give a blank template of our GameStormers cards. So we give students an empty blank template, and they can make their own card in the flavor of the concept, and then design multiple cards that could work together. An example we have is, if the parts of a cell were their own card in a game together, how would they interact with each other? Is one kind of the resource, the currency that you need to use? Would one need to be in play for the other to be, able to be played out of a hand? How would that work, and why? And really, the magic here isn't necessarily the game they design or the situation they design, but it's the conversation of why. I really like games because they're really cool metaphors. Most of the popular games right now are metaphorical in nature. Probably one of the biggest games right now is a game called Wingspan. And it's a game that really attempts to make a metaphor out of kind of birds and nesting and understanding the vast ecosystem that goes into birds and what makes them flourish, right? So games just being really interesting metaphors give your students a chance to say, how would I, think metaphorically about what I'm learning? So that's something that I think is really interesting about games. And we have free blank cards that you can use, which is really great. Whoops. And I clicked on it. So now it's popping up with the card creator template. So here is I didn't even mean to do this, but this is a good example. This is what it looks like. We give you a copy of every type of card. And all of these are empty spaces where students can put their own art or curated images. They can change the text and the values and add their own abilities in with all these different cards. So we've given them kind of a blank template that they can use if they'd like. Another really fun tool that you can use is thinking about the playful assessment ideals of games. And so what we built into GameStormers specifically, that you could either use the game or you could use your own materials. You don't have to use the game necessarily, is we've actually built a bunch of materials that you can use to get your students making connections using playful assessment. So what we have in the game, for example, are blank dry erase cards and visual dice that you can roll. They have a variety of icons on them. If anybody's ever seen Rory's story cubes, these are cubes that have icons and iconography that you can use to tell stories. We've taken images that are really popular in narratives and in game ideas, and we've added them to the dice. So students, in trying to maybe communicate understanding of a topic, they roll the dice and they use the images on the dice to communicate an idea to another person. You could turn that into a game of use these images to try to explain it, make comparisons to the content. Using the dice rolls could be a really fun, playful assessment activity. You could even use that on a quiz. Hey, roll the dice and use 1 to 2 of the images that you rolled and connect that to the concepts we're learning and why. Explain why you're connecting that visual to the concept. Another great activity is all of our cards. We have 139 unique cards in GameStormers, and they all have really unique card art on them. The other thing you can do is deal out some of those cards and have students connect the concepts to what they're seeing in the art or use vocabulary in the context of the art. I did this a lot as an ELA teacher. I would find abstract images. I would find funny kind of humorous images. And then I'd challenge my juniors to use the vocabulary we were learning for maybe their upcoming, ACT and say, hey, use the vocabulary contextually to describe what you see happening in these images. So now we're using visual stimulus and creative constraint to get students connecting to the concepts and terms they're learning about. So what's great about playful assessment that uses visual stimulus in kind of a playful manner is it can be used in a variety of subjects. And it's challenging students to think with connections. What connections can I make between these kind of starter images and the concepts I'm learning? It's also just a really fun creative activity to get students thinking kind of above and beyond just, I'm defining this, but now how am I drawing connections and real world associations with what I'm seeing in the images? So again, this isn't something that you need to use GameStormers for. You can find really great kind of interesting images out there. You can find really great, story dice out there, but we do have in the game some great starters. And again, I keep using this term creative constraint, but it's really the inspiration for the game. We give you some creative starters, and then it's up to you to kind of connect the dots and either storytell with it or connect it to the content you're learning about. So that is our playful assessment using visuals to define concepts. That lesson plan is up on the site as well. And again, I'll show you kind of where all these are living. Another really great lesson activity is if you're working on students practicing their speaking listening, they're working on persuasion. Our game is all focused on pitching a new idea. So whether you're an English language arts teacher, a library media specialist, if you're working in business and marketing, if you just want to help your students hone their argumentation skills in anything, social studies, obviously a big focus area for that. This activity allows students to think strategically about how they're pitching their idea. So in the kind of party version game of GameStormers, students assemble a quick 5-card game and then pitch their idea to others. And what's really great is you could set the parameters for how they're pitching it. Are they pitching it as a business idea? Are they pitching it as a story? Are they pitching it using some various strategies that you particularly picked out for your students, right? So like I used to teach ethos, logos, and pathos to my students as persuasion techniques. You could ask your students to specifically focus on using 2 to 3 of those strategies. So you can really customize the pitch to what you're going for in terms of skill development. And you can customize the pitch to be appropriate for your age and grade level. I know my 7-year-old niece, she likes to focus more on the pitch of like, what's going to be fun and entertaining in her game, right? When I'm working with juniors, maybe we're working more about thinking about the end user, right? They're thinking more about who is the judge for the round, or who am I playing the game with? How do I appeal to them and what I know is valuable? I'm thinking more about the end user rather than am I creating a narrative that follows kind of the narrative arc, like my niece might be focusing more on. So you can really decide how to evaluate and how to build a skill towards that. Another really fun angle that we've got within game design is we've actually worked a lot with doing the mathematics of designing a product. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be games, but games are really engaging into that conversation. So whether you're a math teacher or you work with math teachers, perhaps in a coaching role, one fun activity that we've done is we've actually had students plan and design a product like a game. And we've actually had them go on and mock up, okay, if I made a game with these components, or I made a product with these components, how big would my container need to be? And we even have really great conversations about, okay, well, do I want my container only needs to be this big, right? Maybe my box only needs to be as big as Game Stormers, but maybe I would love to see my game in Target. Well, I want that game to be really big on the shelf. So I'm actually going to make my box bigger. And this is what a lot of companies do. If you've ever bought a product and you're like, holy cow, it was huge on the shelf, but then when I actually opened it up, the product was this big. Well, they just wanted shelf presence, right? And the students know this. Like, I ask students of all ages, why, what goes into deciding how big a box is? And they can name, bigger has an implication of being more pricey, right? You can charge more for a bigger box. If it's smaller, it's easier to ship. That's why we made Game Stormers small. We wanted it easy to ship to schools, and we didn't want to take up room in your shelves in your school. We didn't want to make the game huge and take up more space, because we know space is precious in a classroom, in a library, right? But the students get that. And then we ask them, hey, okay, what's the volume of your game box? Okay, how many boxes could you get on a pallet? So typically products are shipped on a pallet. How many could you get in your pallet if we give you the dimensions? How many could you get in a shipping container if you needed to get your product overseas, right? What would that look like? This is really fun math. And the best part, this is my favorite math problem, is the students will have different answers depending on their box, and they can have different right answers. So if you ever have two students who have the exact same answer, that's kind of concerning. Did they make the exact same product? Did they make the exact same game? Or did they just happen to, oh yeah, I'll just compare notes. So I love math problems where everybody could have a different answer and everybody's right. And that's a really cool opportunity with game design and math, or just, any product really, or challenge them to do anything with their math. Another really interesting area to explore with any game design or media design that you're having with students. This is a shout out. I know we had some social studies people in the crowd. I see some world history, social studies. We had some ELA social studies. This is a really interesting, I think, opportunity. Is there are so many different examples of really poor representation of cultures and individuals in games, in movies, TV, right? And one really interesting conversation to have is, how can you represent a culture, represent an individual, and make sure that you do it with fidelity? And one really cool story I have from Game Stormers is I actually worked with our Travis the Tracker character from the game. I worked with a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation, Dr. Marcus Lewis, and I met several iterations. We designed this character together, and we designed it to be a celebration of the Ho-Chunk Nation. So Travis the Tracker went through many iterations. I will just be the first to tell you the first iteration was not myself, my artist. We got that first iteration. We both were like, we need to talk to someone authentically. This is not a healthy representation. And after probably 5, 6 iterations of this character, we got something where Dr. Marcus Lewis said, I would be proud of that character in a game, which made me feel really good. And so that character was an opportunity to really study what is celebrating a culture and what is really being condescending to a culture, and having your students think about how they would celebrate a representation of an individual or culture via media would be a really interesting topic to explore. So we've got some examples of that, and some really good backstory on kind of our process as well. So that's all something that goes in the game. I also just want to add here too, in terms of our game, we aimed for great representation. We have multiple trans presenting characters in our game. We try to really honor and celebrate a variety of different cultures, whether it is having an African-American character. We've got a Chinese-American character who was designed by a Chinese-American. Our African-American character was designed by an African-American artist. And we actually have a Ukrainian character. Our art director is Ukrainian. And she designed it to be a celebration of Ukraine. So in addition to, our game is kind of a snapshot in time, it's also an acknowledgement and a celebration of people who, also need our support the most. So we tried to create a game where students see themselves in the characters that are the game designers, because game design is full of a variety of different people of different backgrounds. So yeah, that was another part of the game design process that was really important to us, is that students see themselves in the characters they can be. So we have 14 different characters who represent just a wide swath of different backgrounds. And that was something that was a key point for us. So just wanted to get that out there. That's a big focus we had in our game design. And we designed a lesson kind of based on our experience doing a really poor representation and trying to make it better. Last but not least of kind of our current lesson plans are narrative writing and creative writing. So thinking about designing and storytelling and having really games being a jumping off point. And I'll just say that Game Stormers isn't the only game that gives you a really great narrative jumping off point, but our game focuses on kind of that aspect of you start to tell a 5-card story in playing it. You design this narrative. Everybody I've played the game with has developed a narrative. Whether it's that 6-year-old, whether it's that 60-year-old, shout out to my mom, by the way, who has played the game. They've all come up with a narrative that they are proud of. And they say that every time it goes the same way. They get a couple cards. They have no idea how they're going to string them together. But by card 5 and turn 5, they go, oh my gosh, I've got it. I know where I'm going with this narrative. I know how I'm going to pitch this to the other players. So this is a great opportunity for students to then say, what would it look like a day in the life of the game world I've created? What would the next step of that story I told in the game go next? I kind of left us at a cliffhanger. Where would it go next? So games also give students a really great prompt for writing and expressing their thoughts. So whether you're an ELA teacher, an elementary teacher, a library media specialist who helps with that kind of prompting, narrative writing can launch out of games. Really how we describe Game Stormers is kind of like a quick round of Dungeons and Dragons, but everybody's the dungeon master. Everybody is kind of creating a game world as they're kind of going through and playing it. So that's been a big focus for us. This is also brand new, hot off the presses, something we're really excited about. If you are just saying to yourself, man, I'd love to take and run with just kind of designing a game, just beyond just Game Stormers playing it, we actually have a full 3-week game design course for free on our website. And so this is just an opportunity to just have step-by-step each day laid out. And the best part is you could condense and say, I don't really want to do that. I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to, just focus on that part of it, all for you. So I'll just click on this because it does launch us over to our lesson plan page. So if you're wondering how to get at all those lesson plans that I showed you just now, on our GameStormEdu.com website, we've got a Game Stormers tab, and then it has the lesson plans for Game Stormers. So underneath this, you can see those. Here are those lessons that we shared. We're developing more for this game and future games like Doom Scroll that I mentioned earlier. But then down here is the game design course. And again, the game design course is laid out. It has the standards that it meets. It has the game design schedule, and it has individual lesson plans for each day laid out step-by-step how you do it. It comes with videos that help teach it. So you don't have to teach game design. Let our videos do it. If you're comfortable doing it, go for it. But we give you kind of the explainer of how to run each lesson with a video that goes along with it. So we want to make it so that you have that ready to go. We do have a section where you can play Game Stormers for ideas, but you don't have to do that. You can play other games instead to get ideas for your games. Another piece that is included in that lesson plan that you can just also use this as a one-off activity is our game design template. So this actually walks you and your students through designing a game from scratch. So this tool is used to have activities that allow students to kind of scaffold them up to game design. And what's great is you can stop at any point. If you only have a couple of class periods or a class period to have them engage in thinking about how would I create this game idea from what I'm learning, you can just stop there. And I'll talk a little bit about how you can do this as a single class activity, game design. But I did just want to share this template. I'll show a little bit of what it looks like. So each step is a tab in this. And so we walk through, hey, what would it look like if you remixed a game? What would it look like if you reskinned a game, which we'll talk about? And it walks you through some activities where students can engage with it. So I'm going to show kind of some of those steps right now in terms of using game design in your class or your library or your makerspace, whatever it might be. So the first thing that I always do with students or educators is we practice game design with remixing a current game, because it's very intimidating to say, go create a game by your lonesome. That's a very intimidating activity to do. And so instead, what we do is we say, hey, think about tic-tac-toe, chess, or checkers, and think about tweaking one mechanic from that game. And when we say mechanic, we define that as some aspect of the game that controls how the system works, right? It might be an action you can take on your turn. It might be how many things you can do. It might be something that gets in your way in the game. It might be a game rule that you have to follow, is all a little bit of a gear in the big cog of the game system. So when we're working with younger kiddos, it's usually tic-tac-toe. So if I'm working with those younger elementary, tic-tac-toe. If I'm working with kind of older elementary, then you start talking about maybe checkers, chess. Maybe some do tic-tac-toe because they haven't played these. When you start getting into middle school, high school, we're more looking at checkers or chess, but it doesn't have to be. It's not just relegated to those. But then we challenge them, what would you do if you could change something about the game? What would you do? We have them brainstorm, share with each other, and then share with the whole class what those might be. So we take a look at some of those things, like let's take a look at maybe chess. A lot of times students and educators say, what if there were more players? What if the chessboard had more players? What if we changed how the pieces could function? Maybe we tweak and there's not pawns anymore. All of the chess pieces are different characters that have different abilities rather than just, half our pawns, right? And then after we've talked about remixing a game and we get students and educators thinking creatively about tweaking games to make new experiences, we start talking about what is called a reskinning of a game. And so this is the idea of taking a game that exists already, and what if we changed just the theme of the game? And there's an example. If anybody wants to put it, this is always my favorite question. I always ask people, okay, what is the number one most reskinned game of all time, board game of all time? If you want to put it in the chat, you'll get a shout out from the group. But what do you think is the most reskinned board game of all time out there? There are some games that have been reskinned for a new theme, but what do you think it is? Yeah, chess has been reskinned a lot. What other games have been reskinned a lot? Clue has been reskinned a lot. Yes. There's another big one out there too. But yeah, I know I've seen Simpsons Clue and Harry Potter Clue. I know I've played some. Yeah, Monopoly is one of the hugest ones. Like, I swear there's a Monopoly for every state. Like, I have a copy of Wisconsinopoly. I don't know if there's an Illinoisopoly, but there's tons of different opolies out there. So they already do this with games. What makes me so angry is when they don't change anything about the game. Like, it's literally just Monopoly, but they renamed everything, right? Or it's Clue, but again, it's Simpsons characters now. Like, at least change the mechanics, right? So we encourage students, think about how you can reskin and remix the game, change how it functions and change the theme. But this is a fun activity in and of itself. What game could you re-theme yourself as an educator, or could your students retheme that would really be a good analogy? Again, we're talking about that metaphorical thinking, like what metaphors could you draw? So I'll give you some examples of this in action. Let's talk about chess. And it's okay if you don't know the rules of chess. I'll try to draw some analogies for you, but how are the characters in chess similar to different concepts we learn about? This is one of my favorites. I was doing this with a group of educators, and we were doing this analogy. And one person said that the Bush administration was like the king and queen. And they said, Vice President Cheney was known as a very strong vice president. So he's kind of like the queen. The queen is the strongest piece Ironically enough, the king is the one you need to protect, but the king can't really do anything. It moves very short distances. It's basically useless except to protect it. So it was a good analogy, he thought, for the for the king and the queen in chess. This was my favorite one ever. I was doing this with students, and we were talking about Romeo and Juliet, and I was having them reskin things, and one student was reskinning chess. And I asked, the question I asked, like, okay, who are Romeo and Juliet, and your gut goes to king and queen, right? Oh, well, the male presenting, female presenting, but the student said the two knights were like it. And I was like, oh, interesting. Explain that. And the student said, well, the knights move very erratically in the board. They move in like these weird L's, right? Romeo and Juliet do a lot of erratic decisions. They're like, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if like one of us fakes our death with poison and the other one like comes back and like, invades a tomb to find them later? This will totally be fine, right? So they have these really erratic decisions they make. And then the other thing that the person said is that the knights typically die early in the game. Like it goes pawns and knights usually are the first to go. And he goes, spoiler alert, if anybody doesn't know, Romeo and Juliet both die in the end. I don't feel bad telling you that because literally it's in the prologue of the play. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't read it yet. But and I was like, that's pretty darn good analogy that this student made, talking about the erratic decisions made by these two characters, and that kind of love really clouded their judgment. Granted, they were 16 and 13. So I think also being teenagers clouded their judgment, but also love, it clouds all our judgment sometimes. So this was just a good example of making interesting metaphors, thinking about the content. Another one that's been used is thinking about if you were describing a food chain like the ocean, what would be an analogy to be made with chess? Pawns are plentiful. Pawns are oftentimes feeders for bigger strategies or bigger pieces. So when we think about pawns, they really seem to capture that plankton or that krill that we see in the ocean. They're necessary. They set up kind of those bigger pieces to have success. But this is a great example of an analogy, and then kind of justifying, okay, what other pieces would fit into the quote unquote chess food chain, right? So again, it doesn't have to be chess, but really any game where students make the analogy. Some really fun analogies that I've seen happen, and actually we have one displayed on our website. A student in Paul Darvasi's class, he's an educator who likes to use games. This student reskinned Henry IV, the play, as a Magic the Gathering game. So in Magic the Gathering, you have a bunch of characters that you have a bunch of land, you have a bunch of events that happen. And this character created all of those major characters and events from the play as cards and gave them abilities that he thought matched what happened in the play. And if you want to make sure a student understands something, challenge them to make a functioning game world out of a game. Another one, a mutual friend of ours, Michael Matera, that Steffi and I both know, and I know Michael has been a featured speaker at IdeaCon as well. Michael Matera had a student who took a game called Two Rooms and a Boom and reskinned it and remixed it to be about kind of the politics of Rome and the assassination of Julius Caesar. So there were two teams in that game, and he had ones that were loyal to Caesar and those who were plotting against Caesar. And it's a social deduction game where students were different roles in the Roman Republic, plotting for or against Caesar. Again, you really need to have a deep understanding of that play or that historical time period to make a really good reskin of a game. So these are two students who really went above and beyond because they really loved both the subject and both designing a game world that was truthful to it. And the most powerful part of that isn't necessarily even the game. It's the conversations that happened in designing the game. It's the conversations and thinking about how would I represent this if it were a game. And so that's what really excites me about, thinking about concepts in game design, because you're getting students to really have deep conversations and also show their understanding of a concept. So we talked a little bit about that reskin. These are all things that happened before if you wanted to deep dive into game design. And I won't do too deep of a dive here because I know, we only have an hour together. And I'll just kind of touch on these different areas, but this is typically what we do if we start the game design process with students, or if I'm teaching it to educators and education professionals. What's really funny is that it's actually backwards design. Like the game design process is just like what we do for our lessons. We start with the objectives and goals. Then we kind of move on and we start designing what it's going to look like. What does a win condition look like? What does a What does an objective look like? It's all backwards design. So we, as game designers, we think that way. That's how I teach it to students and teachers as well. So the first thing that we do in game design is we establish a goal for our players. We ask students, hey, you want to do a lesson, or you want to do a game about this topic. Well, what does success look like in that topic? If you're learning about World War I, is success looking like, what does it take to establish peace at the end of this conflict? If you're doing a segment about cellular mitosis, what does it look like? Is it a successfully cell that is split into two, or what have you? I'm going to show my lack of understanding about subjects if I keep making up examples, but I feel really good about the ELA. I could totally do one about Romeo and Juliet, but I'll do my best in giving the examples about the other subjects. But these are some examples of player goals that you could see. In social studies, building a society that has met the needs of its people, building what we would call the best society. Now the students get to decide, what does that win condition look like for that game? In ELA, it might be making the most persuasive argument. That might be something that's of value in ELA. In math, you could say you need to eliminate all of the enemies on your board, but you need to land on those enemies using the correct math to get you to that point. When we think about math 24, that's all about using numbers creatively to get to a conclusion. You could turn that into a game very easily. Or we've had this example before in science. Maybe it's keeping a food chain in balance. What does that look like? What can affect it negatively? How would you fix that or go about fixing that? Then the other piece that's really important is sometimes both us as educators and then students don't always know the myriad of different types of game experiences out there. So one piece that I've realized in working with students and educators is that it's good to expose students and ourselves to different game types. So there are a number of different game types out here that we focus on. These are just a few of the many game types out there. But there are 3 that I mainly focus on when I'm working with students, just to help them get started. And then if they want to go beyond, they can. And so the number 1 is like a card game. This could be a game that involves trick taking. So a lot of us grew up on trick-taking games. Maybe family games are really popular where you need to have the highest card, or you need to follow suit on the cards you play and have the best one. Or maybe there's a special card that beats all the others, but there's only a few in the deck, right? Or it could be maybe you hold on to cards and you play cards to overcome obstacles, meet objectives. So you actually have to decide when to play your cards in doing that. Or maybe you're building the best collection of cards. You're collecting sets of cards. It could be a number of different things that you do with cards in the game. Another really popular type of game is the creative or party game. So Game Stormers is a mix of kind of the creative and party game along with kind of the card game. So in our game, you are trying to design the best game. And so there is a subjective piece to it. If you or your students are trying to create games that meet something very subjective, like if we go back to a goal of making the most persuasive argument, that's not something where you can just say they've done it. That's the one in the game, right? There's not like a yes, no to that. But in a creative or party game, you might have students submitting original prompts that are creative ideas. You might have manipulatives that you're using to convey your understanding. You may have judges for the round that are choosing who had the most persuasive argument, right? So that gives you an option to have more of a subjective gameplay experience, whereas some games are very objective. I had the best card. There's no arguing with that, right? My card is clearly better than yours. It's worth more points. Sorry. But in a creative or party game, there is some methodology. Is it a vote from everybody? Is it a judge for the round that's chosen, by who won the last round? There's some sort of way where you have a gatekeeper who can help decide those subjective arguments. And you can at least talk about it as a group to see, does everybody agree or disagree with the decision that was come to, right? And then there are the roll and do's. These are another great starting point. I like to say roll and do's because there are a lot of different games that use dice. Some dice games you roll and it tells you what actions you can take on your turn. So if we think about this in the context of building a society, maybe you roll the dice and it's like, okay, you can take care of providing shelter this turn, or you can take care of creating a more reliable food source, right? Those are your options based on chance. Maybe you roll and it tells you, a variety of resources you have at your disposal now based on what you rolled. Maybe the rolling told you where you could move. Probably the most common game we grew up on is there is a board. It is in some sort of circle or square, or maybe it zigzags, and we roll and we move that far. And maybe there's something getting our way, a trivia question. We need to land on a certain color. These are really common. And students oftentimes default to them because they've grown up with them, but challenging students to think creatively about how they can get outside kind of the roll and move and into a card game, or rolling in the dice have something other than just move that far, is really powerful too. I really like, one of my favorite things to buy is dry erase dice. So they're big dice that you can wipe the sides of, and students can put different things on the sides, like symbols, or different numbers, or different, icons, like maybe they have mathematics symbols on them. And now those dice have so many possibilities versus being a 1 through 6 number, right? So I like to have that. The next part of game design is probably the hardest. It is designing a game mechanic. And so when we talk about mechanics, I've mentioned these are kind of the things that you can do in your game, things that get in your way, rules that govern the game. They're kind of everything that makes the game tick. And so here's some examples. Like maybe you have a science game where you're matching elements to make compounds. And your goal is to make compounds the fastest or the most efficiently, or make the most with what you're given. Maybe you need to combine resources to meet community needs. If you're making that society, you need to say, hey, what do you have? What do I have? How can we pool our resources together to meet these challenges that a society has? Maybe it's tricking others to guess your fake news. So, if you're playing a game of persuasion and you're trying to show how easy it is to fall for fake news, everybody makes a fake article and there's one true one, and you try to determine what the true one is, right? That would be a good game to show how it is very easy to be deceived by fake headlines. That is actually a sample game we have on our website, by the way, in our games library. It's a game called Fake News, the Game. If any of you ever played the game Balderdash, I'm a big fan of it. It is Balderdash, but about kind of the rise of fake news. And then last but not least, too, this could be an example of combining integers to equal the enemy's totals. So this is an example I mentioned earlier of what if you're trying to think creatively and flexibly about numbers. Maybe a mechanic is you can combine cards in your hand or dice rolls to try and defeat enemies at your disposal. And maybe you can work with your fellow teammates to combine your cards using multiplication, division, addition, subtraction to defeat those enemies together, right? So those would be example of mechanics in a game. Now, this is the hard part, brainstorming mechanics. And these are some prompts that I use in helping students think about these prompts. So one example of one I love is if, in ELA and social studies, if this famous person or historical figure was in a game, what would their power be? Such a great and easy prompt that leads to so many good discussions. What would Abe Lincoln's ability be in a game that they played, right? I think about that all the time. Or for me, what would Atticus Finch's abilities be compared to another character in To Kill a Mockingbird? This is a really fun one, I think, in social studies and science. What is the currency in your game? What would people be vying for in your game that's a valuable commodity? So, for example, in social studies, it might be political capital, right? It's not a physical thing, but more of like that idea of, do you have the capital to make something happen in Congress, or does this character not because they spent all their political capital trying to get reelected, right? Or in science, is the currency in the game actually energy and energy transfer? That would be an interesting mechanic to look at. We mentioned a game about combining elements. The currency kind of is, do you have the right element to make the compound happen in your hand or on the board, right? And then finally, my favorite definition of a game is that it's a series of interesting choices. If a game doesn't have interesting choices, it's usually not a very good game. And so just asking students, what are the big choices in the topic you're learning about? Are they ethical? Are they kind of this or that? Are they, well, I can take care of this now, but I'm going to really pay for it later. Are there kind of those recency or wait and see kind of situations? Asking them, like, what are the big decision points in the topic, and how can you represent that in the game? How can you make that a really tough choice for the player is a really good, a really good question to ask. So these are all ways that you can get students thinking gamefully. And what's really great is you could take these 3 prompts. What would their ability be? What is the currency? And what decisions need to be made? And that could be a 1 half-day activity of turning that aspect into the start of a game idea. That way, if you're looking at this and saying, holy cow, I don't have time to have them design a whole fully fleshed game, you can at least have them engage in one of those 3 activities too. Okay, prototyping I'll talk about, and I want to leave some time for questions too, because I know I've just been rolling. So prototyping, there's a lot of ways if you wanted students to actually physically make or digitally make their game prototypes. So on our website, we have resources for making games. We share things like how to make your own custom cards, how to make your own custom character pieces, how to make game boards. So we have dice creators, whether it's physical, digital, or just entirely digital. We have game board creators. I try to, again, for all of these categories, try to have, here's like where you could buy to have it physically reusable game creators. Here's a digital solution you could print out, or here's a fully digital. We do have our card creator template that we make fully available. We try to do that for all of our games. So if students want to make their own card in our game world, they could make their own card and put it in the game. If you want to prototype game assets, I use these websites a lot, gamesicon.net, Flat Icon, and the Noun Project. Free icons that could go in a game, or free graphics that they could use. Really great tools to use for it. And then I build all my games on a platform called Tabletopia. So it's a digital game creation platform that works on Chromebooks, laptops, desktops, anything. So I'll actually make my prototypes on there, and I'm actually going to be using that to play test with students and teachers our upcoming game Doom Scroll. I'll also mention too, if you're interested in play testing Doom Scroll, we actually have an open sign up where you can apply to be a game play tester. Your students can, because we want students input and teacher input on how it plays. So that's on our website under our Doom Scroll tab. I'll just get a plugin for that. So the last few steps of game design are about playtesting. In our game design kind of workbook, we have a whole section on students can take notes based on 4 major areas of their game to learn what is good and what can be improved. And then after that, we encourage students to revise that prototype. We have a whole video and activity based on prototype revisions. And then after that, they play test again, right? At the end of this presentation, but I know I'm running up close on time, I just want to share too, we also have games on our website that you can do with students. We have games such as the Image Battle Royale, where students try to capture a topic by adding images from the internet to a board, and then the students vote on who captured the topic with the images the best. So we do have that on our website in our games library. We do have a version of Codenames, the game. If you've ever played Codenames, it's about strategic clue giving. We have a vocabulary Codenames on our website as well. We also have a digital version of the game Concept, which is where you give clues using visual iconography to help students guess words or to help each other guess words. So we have Concept on our website. So these are all kind of board and card games that we've made kind of digital Google Slides or Google Drawing versions of. And then also made a digital version. This actually is one of the Spiel des Jahres winners, which is kind of like the game Oscars, a game called Pictures. We made a digital version where you actually try to give manipulative based clues to help people guess a picture on a grid of images. So it's another fun game to use in the classroom. And then last but not least, this is probably one of my favorite games to play face-to-face or digitally. It's called Poetry for Neanderthals. And the goal of this game is to help people guess clues to words that you have using only single syllables. So the example here is if you're trying to get somebody to guess, if you're trying to guess the word campfire, you might say hot place where you roast soft white cube. You can't say marshmallow because that's more than one syllable. So really fun game. You can play it with or without a copy of the game. You could do this with your own terms. So these are just a variety of games that are really great for engaging in game-based learning. Okay, lots of information shared. I knew I kind of flew through that, but I did want to leave some time. It looks like we've got 7 minutes for questions. So I'll keep an eye on the chat. And then also, I guess if people have questions, verbally too, that works for me. So I'll stop there after just kind of my sprint.